Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Madeline. I'm my friend Joshua here, and we're from Youth Move National. We're going to be talking to you today about foundations of youth engagement. Thank you, Joshua, so much for joining us. I'll go ahead and let you introduce Youth Move as well as yourself.
Awesome. So hello, everyone. My name is Joshua Calorino, and this is the Youth Move team. This is Youth Move National. And as for who we are a youth-driven, chapter-based organization dedicated to improving services and systems that support positive growth and development by uniting the voices of individuals who have lived experience in various systems, including mental health, juvenile justice, education, child welfare, etc., etc. Essentially, if it is a youth serving system, we want youth to be leaders in that system, in a tiny nutshell there. So I'm going to take some time here to introduce myself just a little bit more. So yes, my name is Joshua Calorino. I am a youth program specialist at Youth Move National. And before I did all that, before I was here being the youth program specialist and presenting to you all now, I was just a chapter member at my local chapter of Youth Move Miami. And Youth Move Miami was a chapter that did things through the arts. And my introduction to the chapter itself was actually through salsa classes. I was in high school. I had mentioned to a friend of mine that I wanted to get back into dancing salsa, and Youth Move had a group for free that they told me about, or rather Youth Move Miami specifically had a group for free that my friend told me about, and I went. And from there, just starting off with the salsa classes, I learned to kind of grow. I did the salsa classes, then we had a choir, and that grew into me kind of wanting to use my voice more and understanding and learning about the youth movement and what it meant and what we were all there for. And I was able to get a peer group, and I was able to start going to evaluation subcommittee meetings, program subcommittee meetings, becoming the vice president of the local chapter, using my voice in many, many different ways, and starting to cause changes throughout my community for the systems of care that were in it, and allowing my voice and the voice of other youth to become a part of the process in making the systems better and having better, more positive outcomes. And that all simply started with salsa classes, dancing, but in those connections, in those bonds, I was able to kind of build an identity for myself and then grow that identity, and was given space to become a leader. And that's really what made it for me. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'm actually going to go ahead right now and turn it over to Madeline to introduce herself.
Awesome. Thanks, Joshua. Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Zelinsky. I use she and they pronouns, and I'm calling from Indianapolis, Indiana. I also got my start in Youth Move as a young adult who was a part of the system, had some lived experience and vicarious experience. And I actually was fortunate enough to have an LGBTQ drop-in center in my neighborhood. So I was able to go there and have a safe space to connect with other people and connect with resources, do homework, play video games. We also had the opportunity for advocacy experiences. There was a youth advisory council that helped to inform the programs that were happening in the drop-in center, which made me feel even more invested and cared about as a young adult who did need support. And that space was so important to me that I decided that this is what I want to do. So when I was a young adult, I was able to take over as state coordinator for Youth Move Indiana, which is a system of care community funded through some federal grants. And it was our work to bring youth voice to those tables wherever we could. So I had the chance to serve on the Suicide Prevention Council, the state LGBTQ board. We also had a legislatively mandated commission called the Commission of Improving the Status of Children, and was able to work to establish 5 different chapters across our state, supporting young adult activities, doing, fun social networking things like Joshua sort of was talking about in Miami. We had art projects, bowling nights, things like that. And then we would pair these experiences with advocacy opportunities, and use that as an opportunity to have young adults participating in their local youth and family subcommittees and making sure that they are leaders in those systems, like Joshua was saying earlier. So we're really excited to be here with you today and talk about our experience, in being engaged as young adults, as well as what we've learned in our engagement through the work.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to move on to the next slide, which asks the question, what is youth engagement? And the definition here is a strategy in which youth are giving meaningful input and have roles where they are authentically involved in working towards changing service systems that directly affect their lives. And I just want to put that emphasis a little bit more on meaningful input and authentically. It's important that it is those things, not just have youth be in the room and have them say things, but have those things be meaningful and have them actually want to be there and be authentically involved, authentically engaged, authentically there in making those changes, because that is what's going to provide the best outcomes. Those changes that are going to come from that are going to be positive changes that will end up directly affecting not only their lives, but the lives of the youth that will be coming after them as well. So it's an important definition to keep in mind. And with that being said, it's not just a good thing to have them there just for no reason. There are actually benefits to having youth voice, and those benefits can be seen on screen right now. The benefits of youth voice that can be found is that you have changes in the institutional culture and practice, right? The overall culture of the entire organization can shift towards this, and a cultural shift is very, very important. And you can help design and implement new policies that better serve youth and young adults. Imagine having the youth be there to give you exact play-by-plays on what all can be better and what policies can be changed to improve the service. Having that real input of someone who has been through it can be so valuable. And it also builds awareness and understanding amongst the staff members and amongst the community themselves. The staff can have a great understanding when they have direct input from the youth, and they can really understand and be aware of what all is happening within the organization. And more so than that, it builds self-efficacy of the youth, which can be highly important and really valuable in their own lives. And it builds a sense of community. I'm sure everyone has felt that when a community is being built within an organization and it feels safe and it feels homey and it feels good and it's positive, a lot can happen in those spaces. So don't undervalue that. And of course, it improves individual and organizational outcomes. The outcomes become better, they become more positive, which is exactly what we are looking for. That is exactly the whole point of this process, is to have positive outcomes. And the more of that you can have, the better everything will be in the long run. And with that, what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to drop into some principles of youth-driven work. And we're going to kind of just list a few of these here and maybe provide some extra context. So with that, we have number one, youth providers and administrators embrace the concept of sharing decision-making and responsibility for outcomes. Youth are given accurate, understandable, and complete information necessary to set goals and to make informed decisions and choices about the right services and supports for individual children and their families. All children, youth, and families have biological, adoptive, foster, or surrogate family voice advocating on their behalf and may appoint them as a substitute in decision makers at any time. Number four here, youth and youth-run organization engage in youth peer support activities to reduce isolation, gather and disseminate accurate information, and strengthen youth voice. Number five here, youth and youth-run organizations provide direction for decisions that impact funding for services, treatments, and supports, and advocate for families and youth to have choices. Number six, providers take the initiative to change policy and practice from provider-driven to youth-driven, which we will talk about a little bit more later. Number seven, administrators allocate staff, training, support, and resources to make youth-driven practice work at a point where services and supports are delivered to children, youth, and families, where family and youth organizations are funded and sustained. Funded and sustained being the key words there. Community attitude change efforts focus on removing barriers and discrimination created by stigma or prejudice, or the language is shifting around it. But the overall general consensus of how the community feels about the ideas of like mental health, for example. It's not always just a barrier of distance or funding or anything. It can be community barriers of youth not wanting essentially to receive services, to not be judged by their peers, as an example. And number 9 here, communities and private agencies embrace, value, and celebrate the diverse cultures of their children, youth, and families, and work to eliminate mental health disparities. And the last one here, just 10 of them, number 10, everyone who connects with youth and families continually advances their own cultural and linguistic responsiveness as the population served changes so that the needs of diverse populations are appropriately addressed. You might hear this as CLC, or cultural linguistic competency, and understanding culture and how it affects disparities and mental health and just their lives can be very, very important. So do keep in mind how culture can affect individuals. And with that, I'm actually going to go ahead and invite Madeline back into the space to talk about this.
Awesome. Thank you, Joshua. Excellent work. You can always find more information about those youth-driven principles and system of care values. We're going to have a lot of excellent resources going on in our video description if you're joining us on YouTube. So please feel free to check those out and dig a little deeper if you like. We're also always available for questions. You can always reach out to Youth Move and be happy to work with you. So system of care values. When we say system of care, this means a couple of things. It is a grant, a funding stream that comes through SAMHSA, but it's more than that. It is a philosophy, and it's the idea that currently we're functioning with a lot of different systems that are operating independently of each other. The child welfare system operates separately from the juvenile justice system, than the education system, or they're connected in ways that are maybe not ideal for the well-being of young adults that are involved in those systems. So these are some principles that we can work with to bring those systems together and make sure that we're serving young adults the services that they need for their individualized wellness, as opposed to hoping that these young adults will fit into the imperfect system that's been developed. So the best way we can do this is by making sure we're tapping into our resources of experts, which are the youth and families receiving these services. So the number one, right off the bat, being family-driven and youth-guided. We need to make sure that we're tapping into young adults and families that have those experiences, and making sure that we're providing a mix of services and that they're meeting the needs of the people receiving them. The second one being community-based. I think we can all recognize that we come from very different cultures all across the country, all across the state, especially the state of Washington is a very diverse culture, geographically as well. And so we have different needs. So let's make sure that our systems are reflecting those needs, that we've got an ability to be adaptive with our infrastructure, with those processes, and especially with our relationships to the community. Joshua touched a little bit earlier on cultural and linguistic competency. Sometimes you might hear this acronym CLC. Just to know, we try to avoid acronyms. So anytime we use them, we're going to make sure to model letting people know what those stand for. So cultural and linguistic competency, this is making sure that our services reflect the cultural, the racial, the ethnic, the linguistic differences that are happening in the populations that we serve, making sure we understand what's the difference between culture, race, and ethnicity. If you don't know that information, that's something that we need to make sure we're educating ourselves about. Are our resources available in the languages that the people we're serving speak? So making sure that we've got things available, at least in a Spanish translation, finding out what are the languages spoken in our communities, and making sure that our resources are accessible in a culturally competent way. One more thing I want to add about this is that cultural and linguistic competency, as well as equity. These are terms we're hearing a lot, and we want to emphasize that these are not standalone values. These are values that we want to see consistently applied across the board in everything we're doing. So it's not its own checkbox. It's not its own deliverable. We need to make sure everything, all of the work that we're doing, is infused with that cultural and linguistic competency, as well as understanding equity. So the ladder of youth involvement, this is a really great example. It's actually one of the first graphics that I ever came in contact with when I was starting to do youth work, and it's been really, really helpful for me. So there's several different steps on this ladder. We'd like to acknowledge at the top, we've got youth initiated and directed. Not every single organization is going to be able to be entirely youth initiated and directed, just out of the nature of services. However, they do exist. For example, Youth Move Indiana, the program that I was coordinating, was entirely youth initiated and directed. I was technically a young adult. I was 24 when we started, and every single person, every board member, every employee fell into that category of young adult. So that was an example of a program that's designed and run by young adults. All the decisions are made by the young adults participating. We also have youth initiated and shared decisions with adult. This is where it's designed and it's run by young adults, but we're sharing decisions with supportive adults in our community. Maybe it's our supervisor, maybe it's volunteers, maybe it's the people in our office, just making sure that we're sharing decisions and staying on track. We also have youth and young adult initiated and directed, where we're working together. So we really want to stick sort of in these top three, maybe four, where we're at the very least sharing decisions with young adults, making sure we're at the very least consulting and informing these young adults about what's happening, that we're checking in and making sure the services are actually helpful, because it's one thing to get services, but let's make sure that they're competent. And then sort of towards the bottom of the ladder, we've got signed and informed, tokenism, decoration, and then manipulation. We really want to stay away from these bottom three. A lot of times when we are getting started in youth engagement with our organizations, we sort of start out around the decoration and the tokenism phase, and that's an okay place to be. It's okay to have room for growth, but making sure that we don't stay here. So what we mean when we say tokenism and decoration is basically we have young adults here, they're at the table, but we're not really getting information from them. We're not really offering anything back. They're here so that we can say, there was a young adult at this meeting, and so this box is checked. But making sure that we move past that and we find ways for them to be engaged, and we find roles that they can have in our organization. So this brings us to a sort of self-reflection, a thought question we would like to offer you all. We're going to have a few of these. So we want to ask you to think about, where are we on this ladder? Where am I professionally? Where is our organization as far as youth engagement is going? We will have links to that ladder down in the description, as well as some more details. And we really ask you to reflect on that, and find ways that we can move up the ladder. It's okay to be sort of on those bottom rungs, because it means you have room for growth. So one of the things we can think about when we ask, where are we as an organization? How can we advance young adults, increase their capacity, make sure that we're getting youth voice in every way that we can? Having youth engagement and having youth decision makers doesn't happen overnight. It happens through supporting those young adults, through increasing their capacity, increasing our own capacity, and making small changes along the way. Some of you may be familiar with this phrase of we're trying to sort of turn an aircraft carrier, and that takes a long time. And we do it, 1 degree at a time. So let's find, where's the low hanging fruit? What are our big goals? What are big goals that we can set for ourselves? And this is a really wonderful tool for that. So you're seeing right now on your screen a graph, I'm going to call it a matrix, of how young adults can have roles within our organization. And they exist on a scale all the way from informed to empower. And I think about this scale as sort of, there's young adults that want to be involved fully. They're like, this is what I want to do. You know, like Joshua and I, we got into it and we're like, this is what I want to do with my life. But there's also young adults that just have a passing experience and they want to offer their voice, but they have other things going on. It can't be their main focus, but that voice is still valuable. So how can we capture that? So doing things like having them inform our work, whether it is featuring stories about those young adults, having fact sheets, getting resources and information out, letting them know about our organization. And then we can also do things like on this other side of the scale, empowering them all the way to, can we hire a young adult to have a staff role or bring them on as a peer specialist? Can we help support them in being leaders in the family movement and being those decision makers, creating steering committees or strategy groups? These are some of the more involved and intense ways we want to get there, because that's where the real, the big ideas and the big changes come. But there's opportunities all along the way. We can ask for consultation by sending out surveys, by having conversations with young adults. One of my favorite quotes from Joshua is, if you don't know what young adults want or need, just ask them what they need. Getting them involved by maybe having them facilitate groups or do a presentation at a conference. This is something that can increase their confidence, it increases their knowledge, it increases their confidence in themselves and their capacity to do work. And then working together under this collaboration where we have advisory councils, we have support groups, even just a liaison to go and say, I'm the young adult voice representative in this space. So I invite you to maybe, think of this as, we like to joke and say that it's sort of a youth engagement bingo, right? So where can our organization fit these in? And I do believe that that is our next question that we'll invite you to think about. What of these roles would fit into our organization? Every organization is different, just like every community is different. So which of these can we work with? If you can identify, hey, we do have space for that. We could have a youth advisory role on one of our councils or boards. Let's make that happen. Let's set it as a goal. And the more we make of those little changes, the more big changes are going to happen.
Awesome, and thank you so much, Maddie. With that, we're going to take a transition into the idea of meaningful partnerships. So these are just some things that youth want in a meaningful partnership. We talked about the ladder youth engagement and the roles that they can have. So keep these things in mind. So youth want the choice of how to participate. How can they show up? What they want that to look like. You can build that all with them. And they want options that build on their skills and interests, on the skills and interests that they maybe decided to participate in. How can they grow? What can build their capacity? How can they increase that? We want to kind of build them up in these things. And also the idea that there's a clear understanding of roles, tasks, and expectations. It's not just to be given a task to do, but to be given specific tasks, a specific role that has specific expectations so that everyone is on the same page with what is supposed to be happening. What am I doing? Support and coaching. So once they get into these roles, it's about supporting them in those roles, potentially even coaching them if necessary on what they're doing, on that participation, on building their skills. They have a support and they have a coach, maybe both, maybe just one or the other, but that infrastructure is there. And they want to be a meaningful partner, right? They want to feel valued. They want to know where this information is going, where they're doing is going, how it's helping, how it's growing. All of these things are important. And to also grow with opportunities to participate in the work. So once they get into these roles, how can they grow with the available opportunities? If that's through funding, if that's through a new program, is that whatever that might look like, how can they grow and continue to participate? And of course, they want connection with others who share a common experience. This leads a little bit into peer support and just having peers, but having people who you can identify with and having that common experiences can really, really mean a lot. To provide some insight into this is some of the individuals that I connected with back all the way in Youth of Miami's are Youth of Miami, rather, not in plural, in Youth of Miami are people who I still engage with today, who are my friends today, who I still share common experiences with and see on a regular basis, although not so regular with COVID, but you understand. But yes, they want to have those connections with others, and that can also grow along with their roles. But let's say you've made meaningful partnerships, you're doing some of these things. How can you continue to support that? And this leads to the question of how to support youth voice in meetings. And it can sometimes be about creating a youth-friendly safe space. And that can sometimes be about having the youth have their own space. And that doesn't just mean having beanbag chairs and things like that, which are great, but it can also be about them having a space of their own, but even more than that, having a common language, having an understanding of what all they're doing, some of the tips we talked about before, and having a place to show all of those things off can be rather important. Them being invited into the space, welcome into the space, the culture of your organization being adapted to having them around, all of those things together can create a youth-friendly, safe space. And understanding what is happening in the meetings. Meetings can sometimes be overwhelming. There's a lot of people. You have people from all different departments. All of them have their own sets of issues and problems and troubles and successes that are happening. And that can kind of be overwhelming, but understanding what is going on, having that agenda in place, having maybe that mentor or that coach or that support kind of be there in the room or have a meeting with them prior, which it says on that next point, debriefing before and after, can be extremely vital. Understanding what they're getting into going into the meeting and seeing what might have not been so well, what might have been very successful in the meeting once it's over, to then implement that for upcoming and following meetings after is so important. Ask youth for their opinion instead of waiting for them to speak. I feel like it's kind of a universal thing where you're trying to kind of get a word in and you just can't quite find the space to do that. Sometimes just opening that door for them, rather, can be good. Asking them, what are your thoughts on this? How are you feeling? What do you think about this? Those kinds of things, instead of just kind of waiting for them to get a word in, can be so very helpful. Let youth know how their input is being used. So you say you have this meeting, everything goes well, you get it, all the information that you're looking for, and you use it, and then that's it. You just kind of use it and kind of move on. The youth don't know what's happening. The youth don't know how anything that they've said is being used. They don't see potentially the result of what all that is. And they're kind of left in this state of limbo, versus if you were to make the changes, you can then let them know, this is what we did. This is how we implement it. This is how your words are being used, your ideas, your thoughts and opinion. This is where they've all gone. They have a value that's being attributed to them, and they can see the changes that are being made because of them. And that can be huge, and that can really sustain their continued support and input in those things. We've talked about this a few times now, but things like avoiding acronyms can be very, very important. And more generally speaking, the importance of language is very the importance of language is there, and it kind of talks about it in that last point there about the use of common language. Everyone wants to be on the same page. Communication is the idea of sending out ideas and receiving ideas. That's what communication is. And if the ideas can't be understood, if the information cannot be really decoded, then communication isn't actually happening. So you want to have a common language, and that can be happening in the meeting with a quick aside. If you use an acronym, say, oh, this is what that acronym means. It can happen during that debrief before, where these might be things that might come up, or it can happen in that debrief after. Like, I heard that there were a few things that you might not have known. Let me explain them to you. But it's about creating that space of common language is what we want to do. And that in turn also creates that youth-friendly safe space when everyone's on the same page. And middle point there, have meetings at a time and place that is comfortable for young adults. It can be great if you have a meeting that you've set up to be very youth-friendly and you have everything that they need and you may be doing all these other things. But if it's happening at noon on a Tuesday, then all of your youth might be busy with other things, whether that is work or school or both or anything like that. So you want to have it at a time that is possible for them. And at a place can be youth might not have access to cars and things like that. So can you find a spot that's closer to where the youth populace is, or that is easy to get to via public transportation systems? Things like that are things you want to keep in mind and have that place that it's at be a comfortable place to be. And of course, then we have kind of language in the youth movement, and there's a link there that will be in the description below, or the description of this video. But Youth Movement National has kind of created a little guide to language that you might hear in the youth movement. You can feel free to go ahead and take a look at that, but also keep in mind that language is kind of constantly always changing and shifting as we go along. So you can use these things as a general template, but remember, your communities are your own communities, and whatever language you want to use, it can be the language that is used. So ask, get general input on what language wants to be used, heard, discussed, and things like that. And there's also bridge language. So oftentimes in a lot of spaces, in a lot of professional positions, you have a lot of jargon, a lot of sort of language and phrases and things that are only really said in that profession. And then you have real speech, the things that someone would normally say. So an easy example would be like a doctor uses something like laceration. That's just a cut. It's just a cut. And it can sometimes be important to have someone there to be able to bridge the language between the two. So that can be a youth coordinator, or it can be just a youth who has been around for a really long time and understands it all. But you want to have bridges across language so that, once again, communication is easy and simple and everyone is on the same page. With that, question here: what is something I can do personally or professionally to support youth voice? That's a question that you can ask yourself as you are doing this work. What is something I can do to support youth voice? And with that, I do want to invite Maddie once again into the space to talk about youth advocate, to advocate for youth.
Excellent. Thank you, Joshua. So one of the big questions that comes up a lot in youth engagement is the idea of sort of aging out. So young adults, they get involved, they're gaining leadership skills, they're getting really invested, and then maybe, they age out of whatever system or program is happening. So we like to emphasize that there is space for people to be advocates for young adults, even if they are not a youth advocate themselves. So we actually, again, have a lot more information on this in the description. If you'd like to look into this resource, we actually have a really nice workbook and training about the 7 stages of being a youth advocate. The first one being, starting at knowing and sharing your own story, advocating for yourself, maybe even within your own services, and then moving on to advocating professionally or educating yourself about the data and the needs of the system, and being an advocate for young adults that maybe don't have the same experiences as you, but you're in a position to raise that information and raise their voices and bring that data to light. And then, of course, arriving at being an advocate for young adults once we age out of that system, and creating space for being a supportive adult. So no matter what age you are, no matter how long you're involved in the movement, that experience doesn't leave. There's always a space to support youth voice. So again, if you'd like more information on that or want to check out that workbook, those links are in the description. So thank you so much for joining us. We would like to go ahead and invite you to please find us online. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, anywhere that there's social media. We're also always available for you. We're a no wrong door organization. Please feel free to reach out if there's anything that you saw in this video that you would like support on, or more information, resources, anything like that. Even just to connect with Joshua or I for some peer support, would be happy to help. Joshua, do you have anything to add?
Only to thank everyone for joining us, and hope you got a lot out of that. And like Maddie said, if you need anything more, you can feel free to reach out.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.